this mean it's over?
Does this mean he likes me?
Are butterflies good?
Am I ever gonna meet someone?
I'm tired of swiping.
Am I
normal?
Dude, you said, how does that person make you feel? That's not something to be ignored.
You can keep waiting for the fairy tale, or you can get on board with the new rules of relationships. If you've watched me on NBC's Access Daily, then you know this ain't your mama's love advice. This is Dates and Mates with Damona Hoffman. Hello, lovers. Welcome to another relatable episode of Dates and Mates. We all know how important it is to recognize the signs of a toxic relationship. So much so that words like narcissist and trauma bonded have become part of our dating vocabulary. But are we going too far? While it's crucial to protect ourselves and to understand these terms, it's equally important that we don't get carried away, casually diagnosing those around us or hyper-focusing on their faults. But at the same time, when we are now dating strangers from the internet and strangers keep acting stranger and stranger, we need to know the warning signs to save ourselves or our loved ones from red flag relationships. And so, licensed marriage and family therapist Keandra Jackson is joining us today to unpack how therapy speak is influencing our dating lives and to share why it's essential to move beyond labels to truly thrive in our relationships. Then later, I'll answer this Dear Damona question of the week. I've used them all, but none seem to be a good fit. Is it me or is it the apps? But you know what it is? It's time for Keandra right now. Keandra Jackson is a licensed marriage and family therapist. You may have seen her on OWN's TV show Love Goals or on Tubi, unpacking shocking true crime stories from a psychological point of view. Keandra has been featured in Essence Magazine, Women's Health, Fox, CBS, and in Forbes as one of the next 1,000. Please, let's give some big smooches to Keandra Jackson.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for giving me those smooches back. I'm so glad to have you on the show. I've been following you on social for so long. And then we had a friend who connected us, and I was like, I need this lady to be here to talk to these folks.
I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. What a time to be alive, Keandra. What a time to be dating. And I really feel like, I don't know if your finger's on the pulse. I don't know if you're hearing this too, but it seems like there's a rise overall in just burnout. I just did an episode on dating burnout a couple weeks ago, and just like these feelings of toxicity in dating. So I want to unpack that with you. And of course, I want to get into like toxic relationships as well and how to handle that. But first, I feel like we need to deal with just the feelings of toxicity that are coming up within our own selves. Are you seeing this? Yeah.
Absolutely, 1,000%. And it's so funny that you mentioned, me having my hands and my fingers to the pulse. Like that has been a common thing that I'm seeing on threads. So many people are having these conversations around toxic relationships and them being the toxic person, whether they recognize it or not. And, we're not having enough of those conversations because when we talk about toxic relationships, we have to look at the flip side of that too. And we have to talk about healthy relationships too. And I think that relationships get so much negativity. Toxic, this is abusive, this is narcissistic, all of the terms that people are using now. And we're not talking enough about also the healthy elements of what a relationship should entail too. So I think those conversations need to go hand in hand.
You are so wise, and you just flipped the script right out of the gate. You flipped the script on me.
Well,
I do want to talk about healthy relationships for sure, because I do. You've said before, I think maybe on Threads, you said many people talk about toxic relationships, and some people don't know what a healthy one entails.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
And I think it really starts with, and I mean, I'm a therapist, so, we got to get into a little bit of this, but it also starts with what we've seen in our own families growing up, whether we've seen healthy relationships or not, and modeling those behaviors. So I don't believe that just because you didn't have an example of what a healthy relationship should entail, that means you're doomed and gloomed and you're not going to have a healthy relationship. But sometimes we model what we've seen growing up. And I think we need to take a little bit more time to unpack that because that impacts how we handle healthy relationships or lack thereof in the dating and relationship phase.
I agree with you. I have seen sometimes though, we get attached to these labels or stories. Like if we had if we can like I'm a child of divorce. My parents did not have the healthiest relationship, but I feel like I have a pretty healthy relationship right now. And I I feel like we sometimes look at that story that was told to us or what we saw and we're like that's why. That's why dating is so hard. That's why all my relationships we kind of want to it would be easy for me to push that off on my parents and be like, "Well, this is you guys did this to me." But I feel like there's a lot of responsibility that we can take and there are steps that we can do to prepare ourselves to be in a healthy relationship. And I did a lot of work. I did a lot of work that really wasn't even my stuff necessarily to process, but it becomes your stuff if you don't deal with it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you're right. I think there's an element of it being true. Like, this is what I've seen, this is what was modeled for me. So I'm probably picking up some habits that weren't healthy. But also, too, once you become an adult, there is personal accountability and responsibility. So if you no longer want to have divorce be, something that's happening generationally in your family, you have to be the one that says, okay, no more. Okay, let me get healthy. Let me figure out what are the tools, the techniques, the resources, what do I need to do internally to get myself to a place where I can attract a good partner, but also to just be in a place of healthiness for yourself, and oftentimes we negate doing the work because we think that love is just supposed to fall into our lap and it's just supposed to come perfect and we don't have to put in the work to make sure that it's sustainable when that is the furthest thing from the truth.
So what are the steps? Obviously therapy, you're a therapist. And that was a lot of what,
Therapy,
right? A lot of what I
therapy.
did. I was like, yeah, traditional, non-traditional, whatever. Do the work. But beyond that, I'm sure there are some people listening right now that are like, I don't even I'm not sure I know what a healthy relationship looks like.
I told people that, love is great, but if that isn't enough to sustain a healthy relationship, you have to have support. You have to have trust. You have to have accountability. You have to have honesty. You have to have all of these other things in addition to, truly loving your partner. And some people push back on that. They're just like, love is enough. And I'm like, love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't, do other things that it needs to do. And so when I think about healthy relationships, I often think about boundaries because these are the areas that people tend to lack. And I also think about accountability.
Oh.
Yeah, whether that and it typically it's personal accountability. Oftentimes we push ourselves and our downfalls or even our partners or potential partners, issues, and we don't realize that we had a huge part in it. We don't know that maybe I was part of the reason why we broke up. Or maybe I was part of the reason why we got divorced. Or maybe I was part of the reason why this person no longer wants to date me. People are not putting the mirror up to themselves. And that's a conversation that needs to be had because no one is perfect. And that also means that you had something, you had a little, even if it was a teeny tiny piece, there is something that you could have said, you know what? I could have done better, Damona. I really could have been more responsive to my partner. I could have listened more. I could have supported. There's something that you could have done better. And when we start to do it that way, it changes everything.
Ooh, that's a
Well, I
big
didn't even talk
one.
about boundaries, but go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead with
boundaries.
that. I know that was a lot to chew
Well,
on.
yeah, the accountability, because I do see this a lot, and most of the people that I talk to are dating. I say dates and mates is like 75% dating and 25% mating. And a lot of what I hear now, and maybe this is Threads fault or Instagram or whatever, TikTok, but I do see people throwing around like, well, that person is toxic. And like you were saying, like that person is a narcissist. And this idea of accountability is really pivotal because it's so much easier to just be like, well, that it's them. It's dating apps. It's that person. And it's it is really hard when you're in it to see the thing that you are contributing to your situation. and to take responsibility for that.
Yeah.
And I'm obsessed now with this idea of accountability. Like you said, how do we do that? Where do we do that? What does that look like?
So I like to think about it as taking like an inventory. Like, so if you have had failed relationship after failed relationship and you're seeing similar themes and patterns, and you're kind of like dating the same person, but in a different body with a different face, it's time to pull out that mirror and say, okay, what is going on internally with me that I'm choosing the same person, the same pattern, the same behavior? And we have to have an honest conversation with ourselves. It's not going to be cute. It's not going to feel good. It's not going to be pretty. But you have to say, okay, then there's something here that might be broken, that might be skewed, my perspective about a certain thing, or I think I want something, but it's not serving me. We have to be honest about that. So take an inventory of your past relationships, dating or mating, whatever the situation was, take an inventory of those things. And when you see, and I'm talking about if you got to write it down, if you got to go old school, put it in your phone, whatever you need to do, but lay it out to where it's visual and plain. And once you do it that way, it's easier to see the patterns. Oh, this person was abusive, and then that person was verbally abusive, and that person was mean. That wasn't abuse, but he was inappropriate. You can see similar patterns, and that'll help you kind of get that perspective. Now, if you want to take it a step further, take that list to a coach, take that list to a therapist, and they'll help you unpack that a little bit more. But for the people who aren't there, that's a really good starting point of just being real and raw with yourself and laying everything out on paper. That would be the first step that I would encourage people to do.
What if you take the inventory and then you come to the conclusion that maybe this person actually is a narcissist, or maybe this is a toxic person? What are the signs? Because I think also sometimes we get on this relationship escalator, and especially, you start online, you don't have any connections with that person. So you don't really know anything about their history. You don't know that they've done that inventory. And then you get caught up in the feels and you want to go to the next step. And the next thing you know, you're entangled in a relationship that maybe you don't know if they're a diagnosable narcissist, or if you don't know what's exactly going on, but you know that you don't like how you feel
Hmm.
with that person. What are the signs? What are the red flag toxic behaviors? What are the signs that, whether you have a pattern of attracting this or not, what are the signs that this is actually not something that will end in a happy ending, healthy relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that narcissism, toxic, triggers, all of those words are often misused and overused. And so people think that someone is a narcissist, but it's a very small percentage of people that are actually diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. It is a personality disorder, and people don't realize that. But because it's so common in our culture now, everybody's a narcissist. Oh my God, they were mean to me. They were a narcissist. It's just like everything isn't trauma. Everything isn't trigger. Like, people feel like they can't have negative experiences without slapping a label on it and diagnosing it to be something more severe. So I want people to realize, and there's obviously people who are narcissistic who haven't been diagnosed, so that's also a thing. But one, I have to say, if there's any type of abuse, okay, whether that is physical, emotional, sexual, financial, that is absolutely red flag number one for me. And there are varying degrees of that we probably don't have the time to go into, but everything isn't always just, oh, he hit me, but you mentioned something that you probably heard me say, Two, you said, how does that person make you feel? You know that you don't feel good when you're around this person. You know that something is off internally. Your spirit is not settled when you are around and dealing with this person. That's not something to be ignored. That is your intuition. That's your spirit. That is something that's saying something isn't right here. And that is also an additional red flag that needs to be acknowledged. Also, too, people who are manipulative. That's definitely a trait of someone who is narcissistic, but not everyone who is manipulative is narcissistic. And so someone who will skew your words, who will gaslight you, who will make you feel or do things that you really didn't want to do, that's trying to twist things and coerce you into threats and all of that, that's just unacceptable. And you have to draw that line. It kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier about boundaries, which I didn't really talk about, but this is where those boundaries come in. Like, you have to be okay with yourself enough to say, I deserve better than this. You can't talk to me that way. Absolutely not. We're not going on another date. Like, you have to have enough self-love, self-esteem to draw those lines, because and boundaries are just invisible lines that we set for ourselves and other people. And so those are kind of like the initial things that I would encourage people to press pause on, or for the red flags, because it can be a lot, and it's something that you need to kind of run the opposite way from and not play around with.
Yeah, I I really want to dig in a little deeper when you say that a lot of people are manipulative, but not necessarily narcissistic. It just kind of made me think like, well, I feel like in dating, like everybody's kind of trying to manipulate a particular outcome, right? If we're really being honest,
Ooh. Hmm.
if we're really being honest, right? Like we're trying to we have an agenda when we're dating. And we don't always have agendas that are aligned. And so I'm just really curious about that line between trying to make your desired outcome happen and manipulation and toxic toxic personality traits that are really, like you were saying, that need a boundary, that are really unhealthy in a relationship.
So yeah, the line between having an agenda and having a goal in dating and relationships versus, tippling over or topping over to the manipulative or the toxic end, it is a kind of like a fine line if you really, really think about it. We all have goals, we all have agendas, but I think there's a difference between stating, hey, I want to get married or I want to have children. And, those are my goals and I'm dating for that reason or being in a relationship for that reason, versus someone manipulating you into those things, being like, yeah, we should probably have a baby now because you're 35. That can be very manipulative. And now you have to feel like you have to hurry up because you're at this marker. And, he said this, and societal pressures are here, versus just going at your own pace and going at your own goal and saying, yes, that's an agenda, that's a goal for me. But that doesn't mean I have to rush to be those things. And if you're pressuring me to do something that I don't necessarily want to do in the moment, it goes back to that not feeling good.
Okay. That makes sense. So let's say someone listening is like, I need to set a boundary with someone, or I need to just be better overall at setting boundaries. And they don't know where to begin. They don't know how to find those words, because I find that if you haven't practiced that, it feels really scary setting a boundary, because we are so driven away from fear and towards love and acceptance. We are afraid if we speak our truth and we give this person a boundary, they might withdraw love. They might leave us. They might manipulate us or gaslight us or any of those other things. But it's really I agree with you. I think the expression of our truth is really the first step in moving towards a healthy relationship. And I don't think a lot of people have the words for that. Can you help us with some scripts for how to begin a conversation where you have to set a boundary and you don't know how that other person's going to react to it?
When you do fill in the blank, I feel fill in the blank. If you continue to do fill in the blank, I will have to do fill in the blank. So it's almost like you're acknowledging what the situation is. I'm letting you know how that makes me feel. I'm also letting you know, if you continue to do that, this is the result and the consequence of that behavior and that action, and don't do it once and then it may not work or be as effective the first time and you give up. Like, this is something that needs to be consistently upheld in order for you to see the results. And it may not feel good the first time. You might feel sad. You might feel nervous that they might leave you. You might feel nervous that they may not call you back. You might feel nervous that you might lose the relationship. But ultimately, you're building respect for yourself and teaching the other person how to treat you and to respect you as well.
Mm, that's really good. Now, what happens though if that blows up? Because sometimes, people get here. I'm going to use another therapy buzzword. Okay.
Go for it.
Triggered. Sometimes people get triggered by you expressing your boundary. And like for example, my husband grew up in a household where like his mom started a shelter. She's a social worker. She started a shelter for women who were experiencing domestic violence when he was like 18 months old. So that is the environment he grew up in. Like yelling was not tolerated. Abuse of any kind was not tolerated, but it resulted in him sometimes getting um feeling some kind of way about people just speaking loudly or like any kind of conflict. It made him very conflict averse because that's kind of um you know what was often discussed and modeled in his home. Now, I come from a Black Jewish family. Said in F the Fairy Tale, we solved our problems really loudly. So sometimes I just get heated, you know. I got that hot blood running through my veins. And so sometimes I'll express things with a little bit of kick to it. And that immediately shuts him down. And I'm not going to use the triggered word here for him, but you know, I think sometimes that's what you can't really control the way somebody responds to your boundary, but you may be able to control how you set the stage for it, how you approach them. So let's say somebody is expressing a boundary and the other person gets angry, gets heated, or, you know, reacts in a way that you were not prepared for. What how do you navigate through that? And how do you also then repair once you've pushed a button in someone?
Mm, that's a great question. It reminds me of a chapter in my book called Hard Work or Harmony, where I talk about, is the relationship in a difficult spot or is it a dead end? And I give people the analogies or the definitions of like when to continue to pursue a relationship to kind of repair that thing if once it's been broken, or if this is just no longer a relationship that is going to be sustainable long term and that I need to cut ties with. And sometimes that is for people's family members too. You know, just because somebody is blood does not mean that they have to be in close proximity to you or and also in your life. But you can't control other people's reactions or behaviors. This is why that script that we kind of just talked about was really imperative, because you acknowledge the other person in that too. You could have easily said, well, you can't talk to me that way. I'm not going to call you back ever again. Right. Like that would be triggering to someone. But when you said, hey, when you do this, I feel this way, and not everybody is emotionally intelligent enough to kind of recognize that, and there will be disagreements, there will be times where the conversation does not go well and people get what's the word, they get passionate, as I like to say, or they don't know how to regulate their own emotions. So when they get angry and they feel it rising, because anger can rise, right? Like sometimes people go from 0 to 100 real quick, but sometimes you can feel it literally in your body, you know, as the blow up is about to come on. And when you are aware enough in your body to say, oh, when I get mad, my face turns red, my hands get hot, my blood pressure is up, my eyes start twitching, or whatever happens to you, you know that this is where I need a break. You know, this is where I can't continue with this conversation because it's going to get abusive and toxic. And so you have to walk away, you have to take a break, you have to step back, you have to tell the person, you know what, as much as I want to have this conversation with you right now, I can feel myself getting upset. And to avoid this going left all the way, I'm gonna have to call you later. I'm gonna have to talk to you later. I'm gonna have to leave. I'll see you next week. Whatever you need to do to distance yourself from that. And I think for people who don't do confrontation well, and confrontation doesn't always have to mean toxic or intensity. It's just confrontation. It's just addressing something head on. It can feel icky. It can feel not good. You're going to be thinking about it and ruminating. Oh, I should have said this, or I did this, you know, like all of those things are going to go through your head, but you have to be okay with knowing that what you stated and what you've done is to protect yourself and your own sanity. And you can't play with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. So as we are approaching Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and there's just so much in the news that's really scary, if I'm being honest, about dating and relationships. I really feel for a lot of our listeners who are out here on the dating scene and meeting people who are essentially strangers and very, just and they're worried about safety. And this is something I've been talking about a lot on the show. Just safety in dating and especially in online dating. So, having examined many cases of toxic relationships gone wrong, what are the guidelines or best practices that you can share with our listeners who are dating to be able to see those early warning signs of toxic relationships if they are even there? Like, I guess there are some situations where it's just like that kind of came out of left field. But are there patterns that you've noticed or signs that people can be on the lookout for?
Yeah, the true crime space and the shows that I've been an expert on, those are obviously worst case scenarios in most cases. And I don't want to, put fear in anybody listening and you feel like, you go on a date and that person's going to chop you up in a million pieces. That's not what, that's not what we're talking about here. But we
Yes,
are.
but we got to be real. We got to be real with people, because that is the fear. That is because that's what people are consuming. And then they're like, that's going to happen to me.
Yeah.
So it's a worst case scenario. It may not happen to you, but you got to stay ready.
You do have to stay ready, so you don't have to get ready. And I'm
That's
not
right.
saying that you shouldn't think about safety, but I also don't want you to be so fearful to the point where it's awkward and weird too. Like there's extreme to this, right? And so I think that there needs to be a good balance of making sure that you're safe, making sure that somebody knows where you're at. A lot of the themes that I have seen in the true crime cases was that conversations were had with family members or close friends of the person that was deceased, or someone had an inkling about something being off in the relationship. And unfortunately, that wasn't expressed in enough time. I think that was probably the biggest thing that I seen, or the thread that I seen, was that there are people who are aware, but they just don't say anything. So if you are someone who has a friend, a family member, or somebody, and their partner or partner to be is doing something that might be off or odd, say something to somebody. Like, I'm not trying to say that you're going to be on a true crime episode, but it could be. And I think that's the safest place, the safest realm to stay in, is kind of just like curiosity and making things known.
What are some of the weird things that you see?
Almost all of these cases have some weird, I don't want to call it weird, but it is weird, ulterior motive for killing the person, and most of the times it's financial. So you kind of have to really know someone's heart, not rush.
I have seen that for sure. And this is one of the reasons I talk about slow love. I mean, one, it's it's also to keep you safe. And like I'm obsessed with safety. I really think we should be talking about safety more. We hear all these tips of how to game the dating apps and how to get so and so to fall in love with you and how to know they're a narcissist. And I'm like, look, you just first of all, you need to slow down. Like if you just slow the whole process down, a lot of times these things will be revealed. But it's interesting that you've seen that a lot of friends and loved ones pick up on it before the person does themselves. Is that because they're already aware of it, but they can't really, they're not acknowledging it in the moment, like the person themselves? Or is it that they're unaware?
I think they may be unaware, or they're so attached to the love story. Like, we grow up in this society where it's the, princess and the white picket fence and he's going to whisk me away, like all of that Disney stuff that we have been, inundated with our whole entire life. So we have this idea of what romance and love is supposed to look like, but we don't talk about, like you said, when you said slow love, I was like, oh, that just resonated with my whole body, because we don't talk enough about what that looks like. But to answer your question directly, I think it was just them not being aware of it and just wanting that fairy tale love story. And someone, an outsider, a family or friend, talking to them about it seems to kind of just like burst their little love bubble, or you might be seen as a hater or something of that, when you're just acknowledging that there's some red flags that you're concerned about.
Mm, yeah, that love story is powerful.
It is. One of the things too, before we even move on, that came to my mind when you were just speaking. I had a previous client who always talked about getting to know someone during all four seasons. And at first, when she said that, I was like, "Girl, what are you talking about? This man is trying to love on you. Like, go with the flow, you know." And then when she started to kind of unpack that, I said, "Oh, this is actually powerful." I learned something from her, and she isn't necessarily talking about winter, spring, summer, fall, even though that's a part of it. But she's talking about going through a whole cycle of what happens. How does this person respond during the holidays when their mother passed away? How there's a death anniversary. There is seasonal depression. Like things can pop up at any given time. I want to know how they're handling this. If they lose someone dies, if they become angry or lose a job, how do they respond? So you kind of want to see how they handle things like that. And that is indicative too of, if this is somebody that you want to pursue long term. So when you talk about that slow love, even though a year may not seem slow to some people, but I think that's a part of the process of seeing them in different variations of life and how they manage that. Because you would hate to be married to someone and you realize that they get severely depressed for 4 months out of the year and they can't, go to get in the shower or they can't do anything. Now they're leaning on you to support them 100%. Like these are things that you need to know ahead of time.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I've seen that with clients that have had a toxic relationship or an unhealthy relationship in the past. And we carry that fear with us into the next relationship, or it sometimes even stops us from being able to step into our next relationship. Are there ways that you've coached your clients through healing from prior toxic relationships and setting the stage for a healthy relationship, even if they didn't have one modeled for them or they went through a difficult breakup, difficult relationship in the past?
People are so hurt from past relationships that they forget to use that extra time in between relationships to repair any rejection, any hurt, any wounds. Oftentimes people want to just rush on to the next thing and, I'm already dating someone else to fill the void or to not feel lonely or to really deal with themselves. And that's the worst thing that you can do. I'm not going to judge anybody who, gets out of a relationship and they have a good time. I'm not here to judge, but when you're seriously trying to recommit to someone else, I often tell them that they need to unpack that luggage. When we come from a relationship, we have luggage, ours and other people's too. And so you need to put that luggage down just like you would when you coming back from a trip, unzip that luggage and start pulling things out and dealing with them one by one and putting them away, washing the clothes, doing all of it. How many of us have left luggage after they came from a trip there for weeks, months? Me too.
Guilty. Guilty as charged. This is my Achilles heel, Keandra. It takes me like a week to unpack. And sometimes I'm on the road a lot when Drew's in production. So sometimes I literally just keep my bag half packed. This can't be good though. I've got to unpack and take stock of what's in there before I start packing it up again.
You said it beautifully, because if we apply that to relationships, that is so important. We have to unpack what's there, take out the things that need to be washed and cleaned or thrown away, that's trash that we don't need, and repack that thing. So when we do get into the relationship, we're bringing healthy things. We're bringing that trust, that honesty, that love, that support, that accountability, the growth. We're bringing all of the things that we've talked about. And you don't want to bring bitterness and resentment and rejection and trauma and narcissism and childhood wounds. You don't want to bring those things in. And even if you are bringing some of those things in, at least letting it be a work in progress and saying, hey, yeah, I do have that childhood trauma. My dad did leave me, but I'm working through it. Here's what I've been doing. Here's the work that I've done. You have something to show for it versus trying to avoid it at all costs.
So when does that come up? When you're dating someone new? I often get the question here, like, when should you talk about, let's say you're divorced, or let's say you did have a major trauma in your childhood. I feel like there's two camps. If some people are like, let me just put all this, you call it luggage, whatever, luggage, baggage. Like, let me just put all my luggage out on the table right now. And if you're cool with me and all this luggage, then we can take this trip together. But there's another camp that's like, let me just just set the luggage aside for a second. I'll bring it in later, and then they can see how they feel about the luggage then. Which camp are you in, or is there another camp that's somewhere in the middle?
I'm in the middle camp. And there's a camp in the middle that really speaks to revealing things when the timing is right. So I don't believe you need to come all in and put everything on the table, because that can feel like a lot. It's just like, hold on, I just met you yesterday. Why are you telling me your deepest, darkest secrets? Calm down, you know? And then oftentimes too, some people wait too long to tell things. And now it feels like you've been lying and manipulating me this whole entire relationship. So I come from the school of thought, or the camp, where start sharing those things once you both feel vulnerable and safe enough to do so. It's okay to briefly mention, like, yes, I was divorced, or yeah, this happened to me, or I've had this, I had this accident, or I had this medical issue, or whatever. You can briefly mention those things. But if you don't feel comfortable going into a deep dive because you just met this person 2 weeks ago and you don't feel safe enough to do so, it's okay to say, hey, this happened to me, but I'm not really ready to share that with you just yet. I will over time, but as we get to know each other, these things will open up. And I don't think people use the language. People just don't, they're just not comfortable enough to say it, like, oh, I don't have a problem sharing it with you, but I want us to get to a place where I feel a little bit more safe and I trust you more before I really do that. And if that makes them run away, bye. But if that makes them stay, then you have someone who can respect that and say, okay, well, yeah, I probably have some things too that I'm not really ready to share with you. And when we've built that vulnerability, you're vulnerable with me, I'm vulnerable with you, and we're building that, then we can go way deeper and kind of like lay all of the things on the table. So I'm kind of in that middle camp.
I love that framework that you just shared. And I always say at the beginning, it's always an invitation. And in a way, the way that you phrase that, it was an invitation to go deeper, but not. It's like a save the date.
Yeah. Yeah. It wasn't mandatory.
We're not doing this just yet. We're not doing this just yet. But look at where we could get to if you stay patient with me and if we let this unfold. And I'm with you. Like, we don't want to just put it all out there. Like, I've had people say, oh, I just give them my Instagram so they can just see everything. They can read through my past, and then I don't have to discuss it again. And it's like, because then you don't have the opportunity to contextualize
Yes.
what happened. If you are doing that in a conversation with someone over time, as you feel more comfortable, then you have a little bit more control over the narrative and their response to it than if you just are like, well, here's all the history. Here, read the book. There's so much room for interpretation.
And some people feel like it has to be a one-off conversation when that's not true. It should be an ongoing conversation. You might say, hey, I was divorced 2 years ago. And then you may not feel comfortable, but a week from now, or 2 weeks from now, or a month from now, or 6 months from now, you want to dig a little bit deeper into why you got divorced. It's okay to do things on an ongoing basis and not feel like, well, we have to sit down and have a conversation about all of our baggage right now. And if we don't talk about it now, then it's never going to be discussed. Like, that's not a healthy way to handle any type of relationship. It should be an ongoing process. And the more you're open and honest and vulnerable, especially in the things that may not feel good, your partner should be able to reciprocate that. Reciprocity is a huge thing, which we didn't even talk about, but that's a huge thing in relationships, right? I need to be able to give and also receive. And I shouldn't just be the one giving. And I also shouldn't just be the one taking. So there needs to be a balance, or a harmony, as I like to say, of both of those things.
Totally agree with you. Okay, before we wrap up, we're doing something new this season. I want to know, Keandra.
I'm nervous.
No, don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. And I think based on what you said about Threads, I think this will be very accessible to you. I would like to know, Keandra, what is your most unpopular opinion about dating and relationships today?
I don't think relationships are hard work. I think we are in a space where we attach that relationships are so hard. They're hard work. It's just so much work. It's time. It's energy. And it is time and energy. It can be complex. It can be all of those things. But I come from the school of thought with, if you think something is hard, it's going to be hard. Like, your thoughts impact your feelings impact your behaviors impact your outcome. So if you think something is hard, that's what it's going to be. That's going to be your lived reality. But if you say, you know what, this is a little bit challenging, but it has some positive aspects to it, I'm willing to keep working, like you have a different perspective on that thing, you probably can attract way more healthier relationships than versus like, oh, relationships are just so much work, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, that's going to be your lived experience.
We hear that a lot. And yeah, I agree. That's a very unpopular opinion. But at the same time, I think you're 100% right. And I've been with my husband for 21 years, which is kind of crazy since I was like 7. But
When you're like 5.
not, well, yeah, basically. But when I think about that, I'm like, it really doesn't feel like work. And it did feel like work in relationships with the wrong people.
That's it.
But when you're with the right person and you're coming to the table with everything you just talked about, accountability, reciprocity, honesty, clarity, a willingness to own your stuff and to work on it, it it's it's a different kind of work. It's not the kind of work that I think people assume when they wear that relationships are work badge. So, thank you so much for joining me, Keandra. Make sure you are following her on Instagram and on YouTube at Keandra Jackson. And maybe you can get a peek into her open diary on Threads. The links will be in the show notes. In a moment, I'll be back to answer the following listener question. Am I the problem? I've tried all of the apps and none of them seem to work for me. I'll get right up on my soapbox in just a minute. Cuffing season is coming in hot. You've been sending in your questions, and you know I am here to help.
Dear Damona. Damona, help me.
This one comes to us in a DM from a listener named Nicole. She says, what dating apps do you recommend for a woman in her 50s? I'm 53 and have used Bumble, Match, and Hinge, but none felt great. I'm not sure if it's me or if I'm just using the wrong apps. All right, Nicole, and anyone else who has written into this podcast and asked me, what's the best dating app to use? I'll level with you. There is no best dating app. They all have benefits and they certainly all have flaws. The trick is to find the app that's the best fit for who you are, how you like to search, and who you are looking for. Period. Now, I want to address there was something new because I get this question a lot, but there was something new in this question that made me perk up. Nicole said, none of them felt great. And I really am paying a lot of attention to how my clients feel in dating. You may have heard me say before, I want you to focus not on dating by list, but date by the feeling. How do you want to feel when you're with this person? But I'm not sure how that applies to how you want to feel when you're on a dating app. Because for a lot of people, like if you're in your 50s, I don't know, Nicole, I don't know if you've ever used a dating app before, if this is new, being on Bumble, Match, and Hinge, but it's literally like, you ever been on the freeway and it's like a left entrance on the freeway. I'm speaking in American driving terms. So if you're listening from the UK or Australia, you'll have to reinterpret. But you enter into the fast lane. Have you ever had that experience where suddenly you got on the freeway and you had to speed up right away? And then you're like, wait a minute, how did I even get here? It would have been a lot easier if I could have entered from the other side and an on-ramp where I could start at my own pace and then ease up into jumping into the fast lane. So if you are new to online dating in your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, it's literally like you stepped onto the on-ramp, especially if you're on Bumble and you're on Match and you're on Hinge. These are fast-moving apps, particularly Bumble and Hinge. Fast-moving apps. And you just literally merged on and suddenly there's a semi-truck behind you. So I can understand why it probably doesn't feel great. It probably feels really uncomfortable. And all of the apps feel uncomfortable. So when you ask me a question like, is it me or am I using the wrong apps? I'm going to lean towards the common denominator among those options. The common denominator is you. So I'm not saying it's you like you're using it wrong. I'm saying, okay, I feel the same way on all of the dating apps. So maybe it's not the dating app so much as I need to give myself a little bit of an adjustment period that this might not feel great. I don't know how many people listening right now would be like, yeah, I'm on the apps and they feel great. And I love them. And I feel awesome every time I'm on a dating app. And I feel awesome every time somebody unmatches me or doesn't respond to me, or I go on a first date and I don't ever want to see that person again. This feels awesome. No, it doesn't. But what it is it's a means to an end, right? It's the best way. It is hands down the best way for a 53-year-old woman to expand her dating pool. Because think about it, your life is set, your social circle is set. How are you going to get new inputs to meet new people? Unless you're literally going to fill up your calendar with going to all these new places and going to bars and doing activities and asking for setups and hiring a matchmaker and doing all of those things, how else are you going to find new dates? It's just the most efficient way. But maybe we need to take the emotion out of it a little bit. And this is why, when I talked about the dating burnout episode, I talked about how people put so much of their frustration about dating on dating apps. And they're like, oh, the dating app is a problem. It must be that I'm on the wrong app. And if I could just hop to a different app, then the grass will be greener. Honey, the grass is the same. There's a drought everywhere. It hasn't rained in years, and everywhere there's a drought. But can you find the place where there's a little patch of grass where it's a little green? I'm really going hard on the analogies today, but you understand what I'm saying. Find the place that is the most comfortable for you, where it's not even about like I feel great using the app. It's about this app is yielding results for me, because it's like you're not falling in love with the app, right? You're just trying to make new connections. So go to the app that is yielding the highest number of connections. If you go on the app and you're like, there literally isn't there aren't four guys here that I would want to match with, then I think you have your answer. But if you go on the app and you're like, I see some possibility here, even if it ebbs and flows, and I often tell my clients to try cycling between the apps, which we don't have time to get into the whole cycling. It's all inside of the Dating Accelerator program if you really want to understand the strategy behind dating apps. But I would say the first order decisions are, do I like the pool of people on this app in general? And can I live with the functionality of this app? Because some apps just really don't work for your lifestyle. Like Match may just be too many people, or it may not be the right pool. Or on Bumble, you might find you just need more information. There's so little information in the profile. So ask yourself those two questions, and then really try to just hunker down into the app that you're on. I ask my clients to give their app 30 days. Give it 1 month before you're like, oh, I've run out of matches. I'm just going to go somewhere else. Because a lot of times you'll get that big surge of new matches right out of the gate, and it feels great. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm the belle of the ball. Look at all these matches. This is fantastic. And then it will literally fall off a cliff in about 3 weeks. And you're like, where did all the matches go? You were new. You got boosted to the top of the algorithm. You saw all of the people that were already there. And now it's a process of waiting. It's like if we were going to a bar, we saw who was there when we arrived, and we were like, oh, okay. We had some conversations, and then we're like, nobody here that we want to go on a date with, give our number to, whatever. And then new people walk into the bar. New people are always walking into the bar. And then sometimes you're like, oh, this person was in the bar and I didn't even know. They were hiding in the corner by the dartboard and the pool table. I don't know. You need to sometimes sift a little bit more, but you can't ever expect that it's going to be the same surge as when you first get on the app. And I'm just really encouraging people to get off of that emotional roller coaster that we sometimes ride with the apps, where we outsource all of our agency and we're like, it's the app's fault. It must be the app. I'm going to get really excited when I join the app, and then now I'm not getting as many messages. And so now I'm going to just be like, the app doesn't work, and toss it away. Like, really try to get granular and go back to the dating burnout episode with some of my tips on how to make the app work better for you, and practice some of that dating hygiene, and see if you can get a different result on the app, because if we're always just leapfrogging and looking for the next best thing, whether it's apps or whether it's people, we'll always be in that place where it doesn't feel great. I hope you enjoyed episode 526 of Dates and Mates. I'd love to hear your questions. We have a Dear Damona episode, all Dear Damona coming up. We're doing those once a month now because we've been getting so many questions and I want to help as many people as possible. So don't be shy. Send me a DM, send me a voice memo while you're at it, or give me a call at 424-246-6255. That is my 24/7 voicemail, text line, or you can DM me at Damona Hoffman on any of the socials. We'll be back again next Tuesday with that Dear Damona episode that I promised. And coming up next month, for those who are longtime listeners, you know that every Halloween is just like my favorite holiday. Is it really a holiday? I don't know, but I'm claiming it. I love Halloween. And every year we do Halloween dating horror stories. And this year is no different. We're getting a head start, and I have a special guest who's going to be joining me to unpack your dating horror stories. But you know what that means? I need to know what has happened. What crazy date do you have to tell me about? What unbelievable situation have you been through in dating that you would like my guidance, my reflections, my advice on? Send it to us for our Halloween Dating Horror Stories episode ASAP at Damona Hoffman on the socials or at 424-246-6255. And until next week, I wish you happy dating.